Have you ever spent 45 minutes trying to get a golden retriever to wear an Aloha shirt so you could pretend to be dressed as a dog for Halloween? It's not as fun as it sounds. Those dogs may seem laid back, but they are picky about fashion. Happy Friday, everybody. I'm Brino, and this is the Aloha Friday Morning Report on the federal courts for Halloween, October 31st, 2025. Please double tap your screen, comment what you're wearing tonight, and stick around through the intro. It gets me to the FYP faster. Supreme Court arguments are back on next week, so I'm gearing up for that. If you can check my wish list or other ways to support me through the link in my bio, I would appreciate it. I got a lot to do. All right, grab your coffee and let's get into it. Okay. I'm going to start with some shutdown news, where this year, parents are trick-or-treating alongside their kids because those candy supplies may have to be dinner for a little while. For those of you who haven't heard, supplemental food assistance, also known as SNAP benefits, will run out tonight, and families relying on the benefits to buy groceries tomorrow are out of luck. Fortunately, though, we still managed to pay the contractors to knock down the east wing of the White House on pretty short notice, so I think we're doing great. Now, a couple of days ago, a bunch of states got together and sued the administration for refusing to tap the USDA's long-term emergency fund, which sets aside money to pay SNAP benefits in the event of an emergency. And I put a smattering of the most important documents from this in my shared docs if you want to take a look. They're under Budget Matters and SNAP or something. Now, there's about $5.5 billion in that account, which is not enough to cover the whole month of November, but it'll cover more than half. So the government's argument is that the long-term emergency fund was designed for emergencies like a hurricane, not for a government shutdown, and they cite the fact that it's never been used for a government shutdown as proof. Problem is, and you can check page 6, section D of their own brief for this if you'd like, while they try to argue the fund wasn't designed for this purpose, they also admit that it kind of was, or at least the language was added for it to be used this way. And they also admit that the only reason it's never been used this way is that the one time they were just about to use it, the government got funded again. This was back in January 19, when the USDA moved some money around to keep SNAP benefits moving and the government shutdown ended. And I'm quoting here from the government's own brief, before any shortfall in funds required drawing down the long-term emergency fund. So they sort of admit in their own brief that it was about to be used for this purpose in 2019, we just didn't have to. Well, a judge considered all this yesterday and said she was expecting to put out a ruling sometime yesterday, but the ruling is not out yet, so I'm expecting it any time. She said she's leaning toward requiring the government to use that emergency fund, but recognized that if she does, it still won't happen in time and there will be a delay. The judge said, quote, "If you don't have money, you tighten your belt. You are not going to make everyone drop dead because of a political game somewhere," end quote. So we'll see how that goes, and I'll let you know when she issues an opinion. All right, today at 1 p.m., the counsel for the government and Kilmar Abrego Garcia will meet for a pre-trial conference in Tennessee. There will be a 2-day hearing next week. The allegations that the government has only brought criminal charges against Mr. Garcia in retaliation for his assertion of his constitutional rights will happen. Now, the government has filed a motion to quash subpoenas calling for Deputy AG Todd Blanche and some other high-level officials to come to the meeting on Tuesday, or the hearing on Tuesday. Instead, they've offered to send acting U.S. Attorney for the Middle District of Tennessee, Robert McGuire. Now, I haven't seen an order on this. My guess is it'll probably come out in the hearing today. Now, I love a good motion to quash. It's sort of my bread and butter. But with stakes this high, I'm willing to bet the judge requires somebody from D.C. to show up. All right. A Georgetown law professor has thrown a pretty major kink into the government's argument about deployment of the National Guard in the Supreme Court's review of Trump v. Illinois. Last week, Professor Lederman filed an amicus brief about the language of the statute that the president has been using to federalize troops. So, Donald Trump has federalized the National Guard under 10 U.S.C. 12406, which says the president can federalize the National Guard when he's unable with regular forces to execute the laws of the United States. Also says a couple other things, but this is the relevant part. So the question the professor asked here is, what exactly are regular forces? What regular forces did the president try to use before he brought in the National Guard? Because the professor doesn't think that Congress meant ICE or CBP, quote, "It is highly uncommon to refer to such civilian officials and employees as any kind of forces at all," end quote. Regular forces historically, when all this was written, meant the regular army. In fact, the army is often referred to as regulars. The National Guard was brought in when the regular army couldn't do the job. So in 1903, we had the regular army, and the states each had their militias. So Teddy Roosevelt said he wanted Congress to create a voluntary army as a backup for the regular army. And to cut to the chase, Congress responded by passing the Dick Act. And I am not making that up. in 1903, which created a formal relationship between the federal government and the state militias. And after some revisions over the years, we get Section 12406. And suddenly, that word, regular forces, has a little more context. So, okay, Professor has an idea. Good for him. But it seems that the court has taken notice. And a couple days ago, Justice Barrett put out a short order to the parties, and it said, you guys need to respond to this. We need a brief from each one of you that explains whether the term regular forces refers to the regular forces of the U.S. military, and if so, how that interpretation affects operation of 10 U.S.C. 12406-3. Now, is this good news or bad news? I have no idea. Professor seems to think that sending in the National Guard was an end run around laws that would have prevented the president from sending in the regular army. But just because he got one right doesn't mean he got it all right. So it does seem weird that they went straight to the National Guard when they could have just sent in the military, unless there was some reason that wasn't going to work. So briefs are due November 10th. We'll see how they respond. Last thing, quick check on Chicago Headline Club. Customs and Border Patrol has responded to the Illinois federal court demands regarding body-worn cameras. Based on a review of 57 use of force reports from Chicago, which will be turned over to the court today, 49 of those 57 should have body-worn camera video. Apparently, and I don't know why I find this so hilarious, CBP stores all of its body-worn camera videos on a cloud-based server called evidence.com. Does anybody else find that funny? Anyway, apparently there is not an easier way to get all of this footage shared with everybody, so they're just going to make an evidence.com account for the judge and one for the plaintiffs and let them view it all themselves. Meanwhile, the order that Gregory Bovino meet daily with the judge is stayed pending an appeal in the Seventh Circuit, which is a little concerning, as Kristi Noem said she would not be curtailing their activities to make sure kids don't get tear gassed on Halloween. But it's time they learn. You don't get free candy for nothing. If there's no risk, there's no reward. That is your Aloha Friday morning report. Check out my profile links to help me prep for next week. Mahalo and fa'afetai for watching, everybody. Manuia leaso. Have a great weekend.